Have you ever wondered what it felt like to be bled to death by a doctor? Did you know George Washington's doctors drained nearly 40% of his blood to save him from a sore throat? And what if I told you that, for centuries, leeches weren't a horror movie detail, they were medicine? For thousands of years, people believed that the key to health was removing what made you sick from your veins. They trusted in balance, not bacteria, rituals, not research. And what's most shocking is, they thought it was working. This isn't just about old tools and ancient superstition. It's about the terrifying reality of what healing looked like before science took over. So stay with me, because every detail in this story will make you grateful you weren't born 300 years earlier. Imagine walking into a doctor's room, your head is pounding, your chest tight, and instead of prescribing pills or checking your blood pressure, he calmly says, "We'll let the leeches handle it." No, this isn't a joke. For hundreds of years, this was the standard of care. In fact, if you lived in 18th century Europe or even early 19th century America, chances are your doctor believed that illness wasn't caused by germs, but by an imbalance of fluids in your body. Blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, these were the four humors ancient medicine swore by. And if you had too much of one, especially blood, they believed it had to be released. Literally. So, what did they do? They cut your skin open. Or, if they were feeling gentle, they used live leeches to suck the excess blood out. Entire towns had leech collectors. Apothecaries kept jars of them, squirming and waiting. One of the most famous and tragic examples? George Washington. In 1799, after complaining of a sore throat, his doctors drained nearly 40% of his blood in just a few hours. They thought they were saving him. He died that night, from the cure, not the illness. It's easy to laugh at it now, or shake our heads in disbelief. But for them, it wasn't madness, it was medicine, it was hope. And maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes, the worst ideas come from the best intentions. People were desperate to heal, to help, to understand what they couldn't see. They didn't have microscopes, or germ theory, or antibiotics. They had leeches, and trust. But that's only the beginning. Because the world of ancient healing was even stranger than you think. Wait until you see the tools they used. And the reasons behind them. Let's take a closer look. To understand why people trusted such brutal methods, we need to step into their shoes, not just their homes or clothes, but their minds. Back then, the human body was a mystery. No one had seen bacteria, or viruses, or even cells, so they made sense of illness in the only way they knew how, through balance. According to the ancient Greek physician Hippocrates and later, the Roman doctor Galen, our health was ruled by four bodily fluids, or humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If these humors were balanced, you were healthy. If one dominated, your body reacted. Fever? Too much blood. Melancholy? Probably black bile. The solution? Restore balance. And the most common way to do that was to let the blood out. Doctors became artists of bloodletting. They carefully chose the vein, the amount, the time of day, even the phase of the moon. For certain ailments, they'd recommend removing exactly 8 ounces of blood, twice a week. They believed it could treat everything from headaches to pneumonia, even epilepsy and insanity. One particularly telling case comes from 17th century France, where a young nobleman was bled every other day for nearly a month. When he weakened, they took that as a sign the treatment was working. His body was purging the illness. He died shortly after. Still, the physician's reputation remained untarnished. Because the theory? It was never questioned. And maybe that's what's most striking, how deeply people trusted ideas passed down through generations. We do that too. In our own way, we trust what feels familiar, what's been taught, even when it hurts us. But the ancient world didn't just rely on bloodletting. Their medicine cabinets held even stranger things: horned cups, hot irons, live animals. The tools of healing weren't sterile or scientific. They were raw, terrifying, and, to them, perfectly logical. So, what did ancient healers actually use? Let's open the cabinet and take a look. If you were sick centuries ago, the scariest part wasn't always the illness, it was the treatment. Because once the diagnosis was made, your healer reached not for comfort, but for tools that look more like torture devices today. Let's start with leeches. These tiny, Slimy creatures were the stars of ancient medicine. They were kept in jars, sold in apothecaries, even carried by traveling doctors. With a quick press to the skin, they latched on and did their work, drawing blood gently, but persistently. Some patients had dozens attached to their arms, neck, or even temples. It sounds grotesque now, but back then, it felt like precision medicine. And for some, it was less terrifying than the alternative. Because if leeches were the gentle option, then knives were the blunt truth. The lancet, a small, curved blade, was the tool of choice for most surgeons. It sliced into veins with speed and purpose. Some physicians prided themselves on how cleanly and quickly they could open a vessel. There were no gloves, no sterilization, no anesthesia, just a cloth to bite and hope the bleeding balanced your humors before you passed out. But the strangest of all might have been the cupping horns. These were animal horns, glass bulbs, or brass domes, heated over a flame and placed onto the skin. As they cooled, they created a vacuum, pulling blood to the surface or, in wet cupping, pulling it out through a small incision. It left round, painful marks. Some believed it drew out bad spirits. Others thought it simply pulled disease to the surface where it could escape. One 19th-century account tells of a man treated for lung inflammation. The doctor made a dozen incisions along his back, then placed hot cupping glasses over them. The man screamed, but the physician was unmoved. He believed the pain meant progress. 2 days later, the patient was gone, not because of the illness, but from shock and infection. And yet, none of this was done out of cruelty. These doctors believed they were helping. They worked with what they knew, with the tools they had, and with faith that their actions meant relief. It's a strange kind of humility, realizing that those who came before us tried to heal with knives, fire, and leeches, not out of ignorance, but hope. But what happens when hope and habit go too far? When treatment begins doing more harm than healing? Let's talk about when the cure became the true danger. There's a painful irony in the history of medicine. The very people meant to heal often caused more harm than the illness itself. Not because they were cruel, but because they believed, with all their hearts, that they were doing the right thing. Bloodletting, cupping, and blistering were often performed on people already weak, already struggling to breathe, to eat, to stay conscious. And yet, instead of rest or nourishment, they were subjected to cuts, burns, and bleeding. The logic was simple: the more the body reacted, the more it must be working. But they misunderstood the body's cries. Take the case of young Princess Caroline of Brunswick in the late 18th century. She fell ill with what we now believe was a respiratory infection. Doctors rushed in, as was customary, and began bleeding her regularly, draining pints of blood from her small frame. They applied cupping glasses, heated irons, and blistering agents to draw out the poisons. But her strength waned, her color faded, and in just a few days, she was gone. Her doctors insisted the illness had been too strong. But today, it's hard not to see the truth. The treatment likely killed her faster than the disease ever could. And this happened not once, but thousands of times, across continents and centuries. Even in 19th-century rural America, similar stories echo. Farmhands who caught a fever were bled by well-meaning family members. Following advice from local almanacs, children with coughs were given mercury-laced tonics. Women with anxiety were blistered behind the ears to calm the nerves. These were not rare cases, they were the norm. It makes you wonder, how many lives were lost not to disease, but to the desperate attempts to cure it? There's a quiet lesson here: good intentions aren't enough. Belief doesn't equal truth, and in medicine, especially, the cost of being wrong can be irreversible. But thankfully, something did begin to shift. The world didn't stay in the dark forever. Somewhere between all the superstition and the scalpels, a new idea began to emerge, one based not on tradition, but on evidence. So how did we move from leeches to laboratories? From ritual to research? Let's step into the turning point, the rise of scientific medicine. Change didn't come all at once. It never does. It arrived slowly, almost quietly, one discovery at a time. But those small moments, those sparks of truth, began to light the way out of centuries of medical darkness. The real shift started in the 19th century, with a man named Louis Pasteur, a chemist, not a physician, but he saw something others had missed. Through his microscope, he observed tiny, invisible organisms, what we now call germs, that were responsible for decay and disease. He didn't just guess, he proved it. Around the same time, Joseph Lister, a British surgeon, took Pasteur's theory and brought it into the operating room. He began cleaning surgical tools with carbolic acid, something no one else was doing. The results were remarkable. His patients stopped dying from infection. The idea that cleanliness could save lives was revolutionary. And yet, many doctors resisted. Some mocked him. Old beliefs don't die easily. But the truth had already begun to spread. Soon, vaccines emerged, starting with smallpox. Then came anesthesia, making surgery bearable. X-rays allowed doctors to see inside the body without a single cut. Hospitals became cleaner, safer, more humane. Instead of balancing humors, doctors began identifying bacteria. Instead of guessing, they started measuring. Instead of hoping, they knew. And patients? They started living. It's not that we became perfect. Medicine still makes mistakes. But for the first time in history, we began to base treatment on evidence. Not tradition. On testing. Not trial and error. And most importantly, on listening to what the body was actually telling us. Not what ancient texts claimed it should. There's a powerful lesson in that shift. Science doesn't ask us to believe blindly. It asks us to be curious. To question. To look closer. It reminds us that healing isn't just an art, it's a process of learning, unlearning, and evolving. And even now, in a world of high-tech hospitals and robotic surgeries, those old beliefs still echo in surprising ways. Which brings us to the final question. What can the past teach us about how we treat illness, and each other, today? Let's take one last look. It's easy to look back at the past and feel a kind of disbelief. How could people ever think bleeding someone would heal them? How could leeches, fire, and blades be seen as medicine? But if we're honest, we still live with our own versions of ancient thinking. We still chase miracle cures. We still believe the loudest voice in the room. We still trust what feels familiar, even if it's not proven. Just look at how quickly misinformation spreads today. Online remedies, dangerous detoxes, miracle diets. The tools may look different, but the urge is the same, to feel in control when we're afraid. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, the world witnessed both the power of modern science and the deep resistance to it. While researchers raced to create life-saving vaccines in record time, others clung to myths and misinformation. Why? Because fear has always had a louder voice than facts, especially when we feel helpless. That's why these old stories still matter. They remind us that medicine isn't just about biology, it's about belief, about culture, about trust. And trust, once lost, is hard to earn back. So what can we take away from all this? That progress is fragile, that learning requires humility, and that the line between healing and harm is thinner than we'd like to admit. But also, there's hope. Because just as ancient doctors once worked with knives and fire, thinking they were helping, today's healers work with data, microscopes, and empathy. They still make mistakes, but now, we're learning to correct them faster, to question more deeply, to protect more gently. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. That medicine isn't just a science. It's a story, a long, winding one, and we're still writing it. So, if you made it this far, thank you for walking through history with me. I hope it made you think. I hope it made you feel something. And if it did, don't forget to share this video, drop a comment, and subscribe for more untold stories from the past that still shape our world today.